finished it, I was like, oh my god, that's the best ending to a video game ever. And I thought about it for like 2 more minutes, and I'm like, what the fuck did I just play? Alan Wake 2, which is a very confusing game, infinitely more confusing than this game, and maybe one of the most confusing games plot wise ever made, except like I don't know, the Metal Gear saga. Uh, I wasn't as confused as when this guy turned to the camera and was like, "It's not a lake, it's an ocean." Um, and
Yeah.
actually, playing Alan Wake 2, I've kind of started to understand it more, but by
Yeah.
itself, I just didn't get it.
No, I think the move to the spiral metaphor made
Mm.
way more sense than the lake ocean metaphor.
Yeah, because
Like, especially, if you pay attention in Alan Wake 1, I don't know if this was intentional, and knowing Remedy, it might be. But if you pay attention to some of the book covers, like, just
Mhm.
scattered throughout the game, you'll see that they have spirals on the cover.
Mm.
And I'm like, is this like something they're actually hinting at? You know, because like you don't see these books unless you're in combat or like
Yeah,
in, you know, like in danger. So it's one of those things. It's like I think that change made Alan Wake 1 elevate up another step than what it was at launch.
yeah. No, I would. I think I asked you this before, but I can't remember. Did you play the original or the remaster?
I went back and played original,
Okay. Does
just
the
because I hate shooting on console.
okay, that's fair. Oh yeah, I forgot the original is on Steam, but the remaster is not. It's only on
Yeah.
Epic. Um, but did were there are there QR codes in the original game?
Yes.
Okay, there
And
are.
they're
Okay.
pretty fucking funny.
No, they
Uh,
one of my favorite, which this is not the game we're talking about today, but
mm,
what's it called? American Nightmare. Alan Wake's American Nightmare.
mm,
I loved those little like interstitial like scratch videos. They're
yeah.
so they're so cringe, and they're like high school horror video
Mm,
projects, but I loved them so much. And then you come to Alan Wake 1, and it's at least in the remaster, because I think they refilmed it completely for the remaster, all the videos, and
mm,
they're like halfway there. They're not bad enough to be funny, and they're not good enough to be good. And so they're just
mm.
plain bad. They're normal bad.
They're very different in the first game. So the
Okay.
QR codes in the first game are actually just jokes. They're not
Oh.
cutaways to more story.
Huh.
So this is why it's actually really good you brought this up, because the first one that I found, I think there's a few of them, you find in Alan Wake's apartment. And when you scan it, it says, playing games on the couch is possibly fun when you play the PC version. Something like that.
Yeah.
I probably got that wrong. And then the next one I found in the kind of, for lack of a better term, like the doctor's asylum sort of
Yeah.
place, like that lodging. Um, you just find that one upstairs, you scan it, and you get Sam Lake doing the Max Payne face, and it says constipation. That sounds painful, as in Max Payne, and it's just him going, and you're like, God damn it!
So
Like,
they're not like the ones that I watched were all like Alan Wake in the writer's room freaking out doing
yeah,
his like
no,
I gotta like
actually
the
added to the
story.
game.
Yeah.
The
No, they
original, they just had fun.
yeah.
It was just pretty funny
I think
because I was
that
sitting there with my phone, like, oh yeah, maybe like, you know, I remember there being QR codes, but you know, I didn't scan them when
mhm.
I initially played it, and then I was like grabbing my phone, and I'm like, are they serious?
Yeah. No, that also kind of seems unremedy in a way. Like the remedy we
Mm,
know today is very multimedia focused, and so
mm,
when I think of a QR code in a Alan Wake 2, I would be like, "Oh, that's going to lead to like a little secret ARG thing it's going to make no sense, but it's going to add some sort of depth to the Alan Wake canon or the Control canon,
mm,
and it's going to make me feel either very confused or try to resolve some sort of plot point that I didn't really even know existed in the first place." So, and that's kind of what the QR codes do in Alan Wake Remastered. They're not. I'd argue they're not as good as anything that Remedy has put out live action wise, Like I
Mm.
don't think they're even as good as Quantum Break, but they at least they gesture to something deeper. Whereas putting jokes, like even Max, I don't know, are there like funny jokes in any of the Max Payne games?
Yeah, I mean, like with the TV shows and that, you've
Oh
got
yeah,
my
that's right.
favorite, like Dick Justice. It
Yeah.
just has made me laugh for
I see the
years. I
video. I see
will,
the video of that first episode on Twitter like every week for some reason,
yeah.
where it's like raining
Uh,
outside and you go inside and you see the
I
video.
remember me and the boys back in the day on Twitch when I used to stream there all the time, playing through. We just had a joke where every time I'd play a Max Payne game, I'd shoot everyone in the dick and just be going Dick Justice, like
Is that okay?
all.
Wait, is that what the guy does in the TV show? Is that his,
I
or
don't
is
think
that,
so.
or is that a layer that
Not
you've
from.
now added onto this
I think that's a
character?
layer that we added
Alternate
as just
universe.
a
Okay.
joke. Just because I think we were talking about South Park and we were talking about like the scene with I think it's Butters shooting everyone in the dick all the time. Like it's just one of those things, and like I don't care how old I am, I'm still going to be a giant child and
Of
find
course.
dick jokes funny.
Well, I mean,
But
I think you have the excuse at least of having an Australian accent. So
yeah,
anything you say that isn't actually funny still sounds funny to me because I'm
yeah,
from,
subtle racism.
yeah,
Also
of
sponsored
course.
by Monster Energy.
Ew, is it, what flavor is that? Is that
uh,
mango?
yeah.
I hate the Monster mango. The only Monster I can stand. I love energy drinks, but I hate Monster except for the white one that'll like kill
White
you in
one is the
2
best one.
seconds. Yeah,
It's
definitely.
straight up the best one. I just got that because I always get the white one, so I'm like, I'll get something
Yeah.
different.
This has nothing to do with Alan Wake.
Oh yeah, no.
We're very off topic, but um, first things first. While we get into it, hey, I'm Benny Girkman. This is Karlec. This is Cross Circle Squared, and this is our mini podcast
Mm,
where we're kind of just, we don't really have a goal here. We're not really reviewing this game in like the regular sense that you would see, like, oh, I think this game's good or I think this game's bad. We're kind of just, we're here. We're talking about Alan Wake 1 as kind of a
mm.
companion to the episode we released last week, with Jared from Avalanche Reviews. That was a great conversation, but that was definitely more of a I guess there's no other way to put it other than a review, right? This is
Mm,
kind of just a little discussion today. Things we liked,
mm,
things we didn't like, just in general about Alan Wake. And I think first I want to just talk about the very, very blatant, almost whiplash difference in tone from Alan Wake 1 to Alan Wake 2. Because I played these games right next to each other. I
mm.
played Alan Wake 1 like a week before it came out, and then I played 80% of Control and I couldn't finish it. And then Alan Wake 2 came out. I was like, I'm not finishing that game. And I went straight to Alan Wake 2. And so I don't know if have you played Alan Wake 2?
No, I've got a few friends I've watched play through it though.
Okay. Yeah. So then
Because I got limited funds, so I don't buy a lot of
yeah,
new games.
you'll probably at least then know what I'm talking about when I say that Alan Wake 1, despite, I'm not really 100% sure on the actual timeline here, but I think it's closer to Control than it is closer to Max Payne 1. And
I
yet
would agree.
I think this game is like 80% Max Payne 1 and like
Yeah.
10% Control. Um like we were talking about with like the Dick Justice and all the terrible TV shows in the Max Payne games, or at least the first two.
Mm,
And the kind of like, even just the game industry being very juvenile at that point, and like,
mm.
this is the Spike TV Awards. We're gonna put women in their bikinis on because that's what gamers want. Like that kind of um, place that the games industry was in. It
Mm.
kind of fits. This is also completely unrelated, but the other day I went onto Naughty Dog's website. I went onto a web archive of like a very, very old Naughty Dog website, and
Mm.
it is the cringiest, the funniest, and also the like single saddest I've ever been reading through a website. It is completely unfunny, and it is
Mm.
very hey guys, this is the year 2000 and we're edgy kind of like authorship there. And
Mm.
I wasn't alive for the Max Payne games. I wasn't alive for like that era where where you saw all that kind of thing go down. When I was
Yeah.
gaming age, it was already kind of a mature medium in a sense, uh,
Mm.
or at least it shed a lot of that kind of like teenager edginess. At least by the time that I got here, but Alan Wake 1 has a lot of that, where although it's trying to take itself more seriously, I think than 90% of the games at the time, it's
Mm.
it still feels kind of young in a sense, like
Yeah.
if
Just as a quick tidbit though, with the going back to the 2000s
yeah.
website, the Space Jam website for the original movie with Michael Jordan is still up. Like they still pay
Really,
for that shit to exist. Yeah,
that
it's
is
one of my
funny. No, I've
most
actually
random things I love.
I went to that website, but I think I went on it like through Web Archive one day. I'm like, this,
Yeah,
first of all, that website was sick. Okay,
yeah.
and actually,
Graphic
while we're
design is our passion.
on this, the like 2000s vibes of web design, where everything
Mm.
just looks shitty. First of all, it looks
Oh
terrible,
yeah.
but it has this like this. I don't even know how to describe it. It just feels um it it very much captures 2000s like feeling in a way that
Mm.
movies don't really, games definitely don't. It's just like
Mm.
this is what it felt like, or what I when I wasn't there. So this is what I think it felt like to like write
Yeah,
on a forum and that kind
it's
of thing.
100% true. Like they encapsulate what culture was at that time,
Yeah.
like better than any other medium. And then you get to today, and it's like, yeah, no, websites all kind of look, yeah, they're pretty, but they're all.
I can't say anything to that because that is how I exactly how I designed all of the branding for this channel. So I'm not gonna
That's all
bad
right.
talk minimalist design. And it's not that I like minimalist design per se. It's that uh, that's the highest skill I have is putting like two little things on a page and making them
Hey,
kind of look okay.
I mean, it looks nice to me. That's all that matters.
You know, I actually took a graphic design class in high school where I made
Mm,
a like a fake game journalist website, and
mm.
it was on Weebly and it was still up. So I actually went to that website when I was designing our website. I was like, what did I do here? I'm gonna just copy this. And it not almost none of it's on the website now because I've redesigned it like 3 times because I every time
Mm.
I make something I'll go back 3 weeks later and be like this sucked. I'm gonna get rid of everything
Yeah.
here. But it was very the first iteration of our website was very close to my high school website. Um, but
Love
yeah,
that.
eh, Alan Wake 1 is kind of it's like it's trying to take itself seriously, but it doesn't achieve it. And
Yeah.
th- first of all, I think the main driver of that is one, Alan Wake is such an unserious person. Like
Yeah.
this guy is not believable in the slightest. He is one the most stupid character I think ever put to paper in many ways, where he is like
Mm.
he's like a dumb little bunny, you know, like things just happen and he's like, I guess I got to do it. Um
Yeah,
and
he's a little too go with the flow.
yeah, and especially they're like very early on in the game they try to set him up as like this guy, this writer, he's a badass, right? He
Mm.
punches paparazzi and he drinks and he goes around and he fucks women and he does drugs. And I'm like, this guy this guy is the kind of guy to be like alone in his room at 3 a.m. trying to think if like the funny joke he said yesterday actually hit the room right or not.
Yeah.
And it does not match the actual Alan that we see in game, I think, at all. Weirdly,
Yeah.
um,
I think he's definitely he's very weedy.
yeah,
Like he's just he's not a badass. He really isn't. Like he is. I remember messaging you saying when I started replaying the game, I'm like,
mhm.
man, he's just a prick because
Yeah,
all he does is yell at his wife over
yeah.
nothing. He is the type of guy who thinks he's a tough guy, but
Mhm.
you just look at him, you're like, you are absolutely freaking pathetic.
Which I think maybe if Alan Wake 1 as it is was created in 2022 with current Remedy, I would be
Mm,
like, that was on purpose. You know, like
yeah.
hit us the game trying to tell us that he was this bad boy that like he did bad stuff. You know, he's
Mm,
so cool when he goes and drinks till 3 a.m. and whatever else they tried to say he did. I'd be like, that's on
mm,
purpose. That's like Alan's idea of himself, and then in the game where we're actually seeing like his true self, where he's kind of just an idiot asshole who doesn't really know what's going
yeah.
on and
Yeah.
like tries to make himself feel better about it. I don't think that was on purpose though.
No.
And
I definitely think his portrayal in 2
oh
saves
yeah,
the character
yeah,
just immensely. Like,
he's
he's so much more relatable, like, he's understandable why he's the way he is. Whereas in the first game, it's like, you're being an asshole to try and, puff the chest, but it's got no impact.
yeah, and I think some of it especially kind of confused me in the characterization that they were trying to make of him because at one point they're like, first of all, literally like the things we see him do, like you said, he's kind of an asshole. He
Mm.
yells at his wife a lot, and he's like, "Oh, she's scared of the dark. The power just went out. I'm just gonna leave. See how she likes
Yeah.
that." Like that's like almost literally abuse. And
Yeah.
then kind of at the end, and especially in American Nightmare, they make Scratch Up to be his alter ego, where it's like all the bad parts of him. But
Yeah.
Alan Wake already had so many bad parts of him, and
Yeah.
they don't go away when Scratch appears. And so you just have like
Yeah.
asshole Alan Wake and like sexy asshole Alan Wake. And
Yeah.
it's not actually the character foil I think they tried to make.
It's like that meme, like that guy who did his like high school yearbook. It's like Daniel and then cooler Daniel, and he's
Yeah.
just wearing
Yeah.
sunglasses.
Yeah.
Like,
That's
it's
that's that's the
100% true.
extent of what they've done here too. And that's I think goes back to the juvenile design that we kind of see in the game where
Mm,
that's I think all they were really capable of. And I'm very sorry to all the Max Payne lovers. I love Max Payne 2, okay? I'm a Max Payne
mm,
2 lover, but Max Payne 1 and 2 are very surface level. And I think
definitely.
part of that is definitely that it was just what you could do at the time. There aren't many games that
Mm,
feel as deep as a as you can with a current day game. But man, some of the things that, especially in Alan Wake, the cracks start to show. I think it
mm,
helps in Max Payne 1 and 2 because he's this is like a it's like we're watching a TV show sort of where like these are characters that are being played. And I
mm,
never believed that Max Payne is a real character. You know,
mm.
I'm like this is a they're trying to make a detective noir guy that really is really sad, um, and depressed, and that is the character they have made. And then in something like Alan Wake 2, it doesn't feel like a character as much. It feels like a person on screen that I'm experiencing through the game.
Mm.
And Remedy tries to reach that with Alan Wake 1, but they fail. And it just feels more like the like I'm watching a stage play more than I'm experiencing it
Mm.
in like a real way.
Yeah, I mean, like, you look at a lot of games of that era, it's like not many games really reached that maturity in terms of going deep
Yeah.
in terms of characterization. Because it's like, first game I think of, everyone's favorite horror game of all time, Silent Hill 2.
Hmm.
Like that, let's be real, that's like one of the very few games of that kind of time period that honestly nails it, even if like the voice acting isn't great, the actual
Yeah.
game itself, hit and miss for some people. Um, but you look at like everything else that was out at the time that was also popular, like your Resis, Grand Theft Auto was just taking off. All of that very surface level. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, but like there's this cool, big, expansive mafia world and everything. It's like, yeah, that's great, but where's the depth to the character other than, hey, this like take Grand Theft Auto 3. The lead character's mum is like the guy from Sopranos,
Yeah.
his mum who's just a bitch and hates him. Like
Yeah.
that's not depth. That's just surface level. Here's a character for comic relief.
Yeah. And I'm not in any position to say if that was unavoidable or not. I'm certainly not a game dev now, even though
Mm,
that's maybe a career path I go down, but I'm certainly not a game dev now, and I certainly am not a game dev from like 2006 to
Yeah.
2010. But like, sure, I think maybe just due to the fact that almost every game was like that, except for some very specific, like outstanding titles that
Mm.
we could mention here, but almost all games kind of felt that surface level.
Yeah.
And Alan Wake 1 for its everything it tries, it's good at least that it tried in the
Yeah.
first place.
I
Grand
think
Theft Auto 3
it's
is not
part of
trying
that.
to be deep.
No, it's part of that kind of link of evolution. You know,
Mhm.
because I mean, like, I grew up, even though I say I'm old as all hell, like, I'm only 30.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks I'm older than I am because I grew up on the NES. Like,
Mm.
we just, growing up, we weren't super poor or
Yeah.
anything, but we just didn't get the latest, greatest all the time.
Mhm.
So I grew up playing NES and then Super Nintendo and then PlayStation, then PS2 and so on. And like I've grown up through like, the entire era of gaming and gone, okay, you can see where it's like, we've got a basic, the NES, SNES. It's really gameplay. Story wasn't
Yeah.
really the focus. You'd get occasional games, but they're the ones that stand out above the rest. And then you get to PS1, PS2. It's like, okay, it's kind of the arms race for the 3D. Like that was more of the focus. Does our game look good, play good, more so than story?
Mhm.
And not to say there isn't good story games there, but by the time you get to PS2, moving into the PS3, 360, that seventh generation, that's when they started to get a lot more mature. And Alan Wake, unfortunately, I think is the right game at the wrong time.
Yeah.
So, like, if it came out 3, 4, 5 years later, like 2014, 2015 ish, I think it would have been much better in terms of the writing than what it is.
Yeah. And I think that does speak to the just the medium as a whole, but
Mm.
it's like I was saying with everything feeling juvenile. I don't think it's their fault. I think that's
No,
just
it's
what
just where the
what they
industry
were
was at
working
the
with.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and that's one of the things that really excite me about, especially Alan Wake 2. Specific other examples I can't think of right now, but Baldur's Gate 3 also in a sense where it's
Mm.
like they're either able to go really deep just from like a blanket story like this is the expansive story that we're trying to tell is very deep, kind of like a
Mm.
fantasy book, and then you also have your games like Alan Wake 2 that are very artful, um, and you can kind of now explore that I think a lot easier almost, or
Mm.
maybe not even easier, just it's possible at all
Mm.
at this point. Something like film, you could have done that in like the 50s because the format of film hasn't changed since its inception. Basically,
Yeah.
we've gone from different cameras and different styles and different trends, but it is still people on screen, people are talking, and sure you could say you could summarize video games as push the stick person move, but I think there's a
Mm.
you can argue that the capability to do something in like a NES game versus the PS6 is a very very large leap compared to what film has
Yeah.
gone through.
I think it's because of the reliance on technology. Because when you go to what their core technology is, especially behind film, it's like, okay, it's camera,
Mhm.
microphone. Like, because the biggest leap was going, okay, we're going to add in sound and then we're
Yeah.
going to add in color. And then since then, it's like, what more can you add? Like, you can't really, it's like,
3D
okay, well,
guys, 3D is the future. 3D glasses.
I am so glad 3D died.
Yeah.
It's the worst friggin' trend.
My family actually
Um,
has this huge TV that was made for 3D that just finally like it couple weeks ago it kind of stopped working, and they finally got like a modern TV, but that thing is
mm,
huge, and it had these, like, I forget how much my grandfather said he paid for these 3D glasses. They're like made
yeah.
for the TV. It's like $350, and he said we paid $350 for 4 sets, and we watched one movie, and that was it. I,
Yeah, it's just one of those things, like I'm glad I never got onto that bandwagon. But like with gaming, it's like you look at not just graphics have improved, but obviously being able to have, haptic feedback,
Mhm.
spatial audio, like there's still so much more we can add to the medium to grow it. And I think like cloud gaming is honestly that next step in my
Okay,
opinion.
Hideo
Like
Kojima.
that's where Yeah, I think that's where we're gonna have to go to, which is gonna be interesting in terms of physical and digital media, but that's a debate for another day.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like I think gaming, has evolved very quickly as a medium compared to that of, film, even TV. Um, you know, I mean, books obviously haven't really changed a hell of a lot, but
That's
music
actually a
even.
good example though, that like books, there is no innovation since the printing
Yeah,
press. There's nothing.
yeah,
You're not expanding the capability of a book. It's just words on a page. And so movies
yeah,
is like in between, where sure, 3D maybe was an attempt at
yeah,
something like that, or like there's movie theaters that have like smell
mm,
receptors in them that you can smell the grass in this scene. Like that, those are attempts,
yeah,
pretty bad attempts, but they're trying. And then
yeah,
video games have just been like a steady march higher
yeah,
and higher on that scale, without anyone really trying to innovate past, we just want our game to look better and feel better.
yeah. And like Alan Wake 2 is one of those games that, like, honestly, I think is such a breath of fresh air where
Hmm.
we're not going to do the publisher route. We're going to do the developer route. We're going to make our game, not their game.
Hmm.
Because could you imagine, like, if someone like EA or Activision was publishing that game, you would just have, here, have loot boxes for
Yeah.
fucking flashlight batteries. You'd be like, why? But they'd find a way to do it. And, again, Alan Wake, like, it's one of the earliest accounts that I can remember of DLC being something where it's like, okay, this is actually kind of worth it.
Hmm.
Which I got to give to Remedy because DLC as a practice, in my opinion, it's not bad, but it's usually done poorly.
Yeah.
Like the idea of it's fine. Not everyone's going to be like a CD Project Red, where it's like, oh yeah, here's DLC that's like another 60-hour game
Yeah.
for $30. But to have like Alan Wake, it was one of those games where it's like, you know what, this is worth touching. Like spend that extra $5. Download it. You've got maybe an hour or two of content, but it's an hour or two of content that expands what you had originally, rather than just being more of the same.
That actually just kind of like sent something off in my head, because originally I kind of, I have a lot of issues with the Alan Wake 1, the game, but the DLCs
Mm,
I did not like generally.
mm,
But I and this is me going back to a 2010 game 13, 14 years later. So
yeah,
my expectations of DLC are, or good DLC is Cyberpunk 2027,
yeah,
uh, Control DLC, that kind of
mm,
thing, where uh, I'm if I'm expecting good DLC, I'm
mm,
expecting a whole nother game like
yeah,
involved in the game. But I that did get me to think about, like, no, these DLC, they might be bad now if you were to release them, but
yeah.
for the time
They're
they might have actually kind of opened things up way more than I would have given them credit for, at least.
Yeah, I like they're not the greatest thing you'll ever play,
Yeah.
especially for like a 2010s DLC. But given the fact we were moving away from the expansion pack kind of era of gaming into the DLC era of gaming, it sort of got to that point where it's like, okay, considering you had games around that era being like Street Fighter Cross Tekken, where it's like, oh yeah, the DLC is on the disc, like it's there, the content's there, but we're gonna make you pay to play it.
Yeah.
And it's like, what the hell? Like we had to go through that crap to get to where we are now, where DLC is typically something worth getting.
Yeah.
Usually you do want DLC for most big releases because it is going to be substantial, it's going to be in depth. But back then, like it's okay, we might be like, we're going to have a little side story, an hour long, $5, because that's all it ever was back then. Like it's not 30, 40, 50, $60 DLC,
Yeah.
because it's not basically a whole new game just in the same engine. It's just like, okay, here's like an extra hour of game. Enjoy, knock yourself out, and we're going to expand the characters just a little bit more.
That's also interesting to think about, because in many ways American Nightmare is also kind of a DLC.
Mm,
It's not like it's a completely different game. There's slightly different game feel, but you could have said to me like, hey, this is an expansion or like a
Mm.
sort of an addition to the original Alan Wake, even though it tries to elongate the runtime of the game as long as possible to try to say that it's a full game, but it's really
Mm.
not. But it's kind of that step towards current Remedy and in a lot of ways CD Projekt Red. And I mean, there's not really many other companies that do that kind of thing off the top of my head. Like
Yeah,
Bethesda has kind of done that, but
they
the
have, but
quality of it
they
has
never
been
evolved out of
questionable.
2010.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah,
problem
yeah.
they've
So
had.
there's the kind of iteration there that Alan Wake 1, if you look at it, it just, especially in Remedy's portfolio, is it's them trying to become modern day Remedy, and
Mm.
they're like right there. They know what they need to do. It's just the
Mm.
execution didn't get there until Control.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things, like, I know a lot of people, especially with the current generation of consoles we're in gaming, a lot of people hate the fact everything's a remake, you know?
Yeah.
And I get it, but as someone who, I grew up, especially with a lot of these older games, and I love retro games, my own personal channel's all about retro games for the most part. Being able to replay these games with more modern sensibilities, like one video I'm working on at the moment, Dead Space. Play
Mm.
original Dead Space, which still plays great, but then
Yeah.
you play the remake and you're like, oh, this is just so much better because it's all the little things that we've grown accustomed to now here.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I would love to see modern Remedy actually straight up remake Alan Wake 1 from the
Mhm.
ground up and make it fit more within the canon. Because I think even if it was like, okay, we're going to say a 8-hour game because we're going to cut some of the fluff, we're going to cut some of the crap we don't need. We're just going to go, bam, here's everything. Even if they did a short movie on it, like I would pay to see it.
Well, there is apparently there's been rumors of an Alan Wake TV show, I think.
I would
So
100% be there. But drinking
maybe that
game
is
for
something that's possible.
every shot that reminds you of Twin Peaks,
Yeah.
you have to
Yeah.
take a shot. You'll be dead by the end of the first episode.
No, yeah, I
Uh,
as someone who has just gone back and played the Metal Gear games and soon will be playing
mm,
Silent Hill, and I just played Yakuza 1. I've been playing a bunch of pretty old games. There's
yeah.
there's a lot of things that for me at least going back to something before the PS1 is just kind of off limits. Like I actually I can't figure it out. My brain doesn't know
Yeah.
how to do things in the game. Like I've tried N64 games and I cannot stick with it because my brain's not wired
Yeah.
like that. And I'm sure if I really really tried I could get over it, but PS1's kind of the cutoff for me where
Yeah.
it's new enough that I can kind of figure it
Mm,
out, but also that ends up kind of hurting me because my brain goes this plays similar to a modern game, so it should feel like a modern game, and it
mm,
can't. And I'm one of the biggest kind of apologists for remakes, remasters that you'll find. I think a lot of people
mm.
get angry because they think, well, my favorite studio is working on a remaster instead of working on a new game. How lazy are they? But really, it's one, it's not the same team. Two, if they're working
Yeah.
on a remaster, they weren't going to be working on a real game anyway. And three, they need money somehow. So
Yeah.
there's no real complaints against remakes and remasters except the very flawed argument of, well, what if they mess it up? Then it's going to ruin the original, which that isn't true.
It
But
doesn't. Because you still have the original.
yeah, and I can
I
see how
hate
you
that
could be like,
argument.
well, now in gaming discourse, it's going to be kind of reviled. And to that, I would point to Silent Hill, which people still say Silent Hill 1 through 3 are three of the best games ever made.
Mm,
The last 10 entries of garbage have not changed that in anyone's mind. And it doesn't, I don't think, at least, maybe other people feel different, that it those bad games, the 10 bad games we've gotten since Silent Hill 3 and 4,
mm,
lessen the impact of 1 through 3. I don't think that. Maybe someone does,
mm.
but
I mean,
yeah.
if you're looking at the series as a whole, sure. But I mean,
Yeah,
the problem
the
with
Silent
stuff,
Hill like overarching canon is worse,
yeah,
but that's not I'm not playing if I'm gonna sit down and play
You're not
Silent
gonna sit there
Hill,
and play Homecoming or
yeah,
Downpour.
I'm not like, wow, I just started Silent Hill 1. Looks like I need to play the go chronologically until the one they just released on. I don't even remember what it's
Yeah,
called, the one that Jared hated.
yeah.
Um, but no one looks at games like that except me. I look at games like that. I play every game in a series. I'm that kind of sicko. But I can
I
separate
try
that.
to.
Yeah.
I try to. Like, if I'm gonna play a game, like, the only pardon me. The only one that I probably wouldn't do that for, honestly, is Yakuza, mainly because there's just so friggin' many.
Well,
And I've been playing through 0 off and on,
mhm,
like, gradually. And, like, I've played some of the others, but, like, if I wanted to sit there and be like, "Yeah, I just wanna play the story," I can't because I get so distracted doing all the side stuff that I'm just
mhm.
gonna lose all year just to playing through all those games.
See, I think it's maybe I'll run into an issue later, but for now, it's easy enough for me, especially in Yakuza 1, where the side
Mm,
quests, I didn't do many of them, so maybe they are really good, but they didn't feel very good, the very few of them that I did. So I kinda just
yeah.
didn't interact
The
with them
series as a
past
whole
that.
gets better. It
Yeah.
does get better,
And
but, like
I plan to play every Yakuza game at some point, and,
mm,
to me, it's not I'm not going to it to play all of them just to play it. It's more like
mm,
a I want something to go back to that I can be like, "Hey, maybe I'm tired with the current games releasing or there's nothing releasing right
mm,
now. Okay, I'll go pick up, Yakuza 3 now or something like that."
yeah,
Um, and I'm not looking at it as I don't think of Yakuza as Yakuza. Like all these games are what makes Yakuza. I'm thinking of
yeah,
20 individual titles. Uh,
yeah,
and so
uh,
Alan Wake, another good kind of representation of this argument, I would say, is the Alan Wake remaster,
mm,
where obviously there, as we talked about very early on, there are things they changed,
mm,
and I think I haven't played the original. I played like a little bit, but I haven't played it enough to know any like actual real differences between the two. But
mm,
I think it's for the better in most cases, but that
yeah,
doesn't necessarily disqualify the old one, even if it is, in my opinion, worse, which is a big topic of discussion with Silent Hill 2. Like, if
mm.
Bloober Team messes it up, I don't think that's going to make the original any worse because you can
No, I think
go
this is
play
gonna
it
make the
and it's,
original more desirable, if
yeah,
anything.
that's true. And I think the people that are going to play a remaster, like I personally, I wanted to play Alan Wake on my PS5 on my big TV. I wasn't gonna go
Mm,
find my Xbox 360 and hook it up and go hunt
yeah,
down a physical copy just to play Alan Wake. The people that are
mm,
playing these remakes and remasters are, for the large part, either people who have played the original or are not going to play the original and never will.
yeah. Yeah, it's also like you look at the retro market and how expensive some games
Oh
are.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like I'd love to get a remake of like the Pokemon Gale series, like the one they did for the GameCube.
yeah.
Because here that game goes for over $800. I'm like $800
So like 20
for a
bucks
game?
USD.
Yeah, and 50 cents.
Yeah.
But no, it's like it's absolutely insane. And like playing remakes, especially uh we spoke just before about like Persona 3. I own Persona 4 on pretty much every platform you can own it on because it's one of my all-time favorites.
Mhm.
But I was like, oh, I've never really played Persona 3 a hell of a lot. And it's a series I didn't get into until I was a little bit older. But I was been trying to play through Persona 3 Portable before remake came out. Well, reloaded, I guess. But playing that and like the fact that everything's a menu system instead of the walking around exploring side of
Yeah.
things, I'm like, that's half the charm of Persona is walking around, seeing, this interactive world that you get to be a part of. And like with Alan Wake, I think they did such a good job remaking it because I have seen a playthrough of the remake
Yeah.
and I'm like, this is what a remake should honestly be.
It
Like, yeah, you can make the game better in terms of some mechanics and things like that, but I think if you stray too much from what the original is, at that point, you might as well just do a full blown like reimagining of the game.
Yeah. No, it's the original game, much the same as Dead Space, except on the remaster side instead of the remake, where
Yeah.
it didn't change anything the original was trying to be.
Mm.
Like a lot of, especially the Resident Evil remakes, are like they're sort of the same game, but really it's just kind of set in the same place, trying to achieve the same things. Whereas
Yeah.
Alan Wake Remastered and Dead Space are like, this is the old game but new.
Yeah.
I think they both try and succeed with that. Where like all of the all of the actual issues you would have had at the time with Alan Wake 1, I think are the same issues you would have had with Alan Wake Remastered. Much the
Yeah.
same, all of the good things are still the good things. And so it doesn't
Mm.
like it's a very true representation of the original, I think. And it
Mm.
just fixes some of the like rough points that were bad just because they were bad, not because that was, something that the team tried to do and didn't work.
Mm.
Graphics are prettier. They didn't try to make a bad looking game. It's just that
Mm.
was the Xbox 360.
Yeah, I mean, actually going back and playing it because I played the Steam version, so I'm playing it at 1440p,
Yeah.
which just worked out the box, which was surprising
Wow.
because usually you have to fight,
Especially
with INI files and shit.
Max Payne 1 and 2
Oh,
are
yeah,
really
Max
hard
Payne
with
are
that too.
always annoying to get working.
Yeah.
Shout out to Jared who couldn't get Max Payne 3 to run.
That was a good stream when he was
That was hilarious.
threatening to blow up people's houses. It was
Yeah,
a good
yeah.
stream.
To be fair, I don't blame him.
Yeah.
But the actual like environments, and this is something I actually have in my notes, the wooded areas and that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, sure, the textures aren't, they're not 4K or anything like that. But like if you're in motion, it is one of the most beautiful scenes in gaming when you're just like running for your friggin' life, you know, but you're just seeing like the light come through. What they did with light maps and everything back
Yeah.
then is so impressive on a technical level.
Yeah. No, I kind of equated Alan Wake 2 to the RE4 remake in the last podcast with Jared. That
Mm,
it's that I think that's a more direct connection than anything. Like the UI feels the
mm,
same, the gameplay feels very similar. The
yeah,
engine that Remedy has made, I forget what it's called. Is it Northlight? I can't remember. Maybe that's
I
their old engine.
think.
I can't remember. Anyway, whatever engine that's being used
Mm,
in the modern contemporary Remedy engine is like even looks similar as the Reach for the Moon engine in the RE makes.
yeah.
RE remakes that
I
like
mean, our remakes actually sound
R
that's a
remakes,
good
yeah.
term. We're
That's
gonna trademark
actually
that.
easier on the tongue than RE
Yeah,
remakes. But um, those two games are like RE4 remake and Alan Wake 2 are like they feel like they could exist by the same developer in the same series even at points,
yeah,
except for the tone that like Alan Wake 2 is much
yeah,
more serious. RE4 is kind of
no,
quirky, weird. Alan
yeah,
Wake 1 on the other hand feels like RE4 original a lot, where
yeah,
it's it's like the I know Jake Baldino, if you know him from Game Ranks, he talks about this all the time, where like RE4, the original, is like the best video game forest ever made.
yeah,
Where it's just you kind of go there and you sit there and there's like literally there's three objects, three trees, and like the floor texture and the wall texture, and that is all it
yeah,
does. But the way that it's crafted feels so real in a way it's not fidelity that's doing it. It's just
yeah.
skill in a way that's kind of them. They knew what to do to make you feel like it was a forest. Alan
Mm,
Wake 1 does that as well in a way that is not really done by any game to this day. Like a lot of
yeah. I
games have
think it.
really good looking forests, but they don't feel
Mm,
like a forest.
yeah, I think what it does, especially, and this is something I brought up in my review for Halo, just to shout myself out. Hey,
Yeah.
subtle plug. But what
Link in the
Halo
description, by the
does,
way.
yeah.
Actually,
What
no, because
Halo
I
did,
think it's our Twitter handles. Whatever.
yeah. Who cares?
No.
Follow us on Twitter.
Yeah.
But the what Halo does, and a lot of games from this era sort of try to do like that 2000s to 2015 kind of range, which I know it's quite a big gap, but as games started to try to be a little bit more mature, a little bit more in depth, what they did was try to go with a more environmental storytelling vibe. And what Halo does is it likes to guide the play in a way that it's not obvious to the player. So, like, a lot of people these days, they bitch and moan about the yellow paint thing.
Oh,
And
oh no. Oh
as a
no.
person who is blind as a bat, I need the yellow paint sometimes, all right? Like, I will miss that damn ladder for 20 minutes and be like,
Yeah.
"What the hell am I doing?" You know, it's an accessibility thing. But you play Alan Wake 1 and you know where you're going at all times, you never get turned around, but you feel like you're traversing the woods.
Yeah.
Like you feel like you're in the wilderness, but it does such a good job immersing you in that world. And like the sound design, as I said, the lighting as well for a 2010 game makes it just head and shoulders above pretty much anything of that era, in my opinion.
Now, I do agree with you that for the time it was very very well made in that regard, but I brought this up about Alan Wake 2 where it feels like it feels like an open world almost, even though there's like
Mm,
one or two paths really that just kind of intertwine a little bit to the objective.
mm,
Alan Wake 1 to me felt the opposite of that at a few points where there were places I wanted to go that I couldn't go to. Never
yeah, I
never in
I
Alan Wake
agree.
1 did I feel like, "Oh, is this actually an open world game?" Like I did with Alan Wake 2. And
Mm,
like I always knew I was being gently pushed along. Now, I was being gently pushed along very well, but
yeah,
I could tell that it was one path. This is the way I'm supposed to go instead of I'm actually exploring. Uh,
yeah.
and the example I brought up was I don't know if this hit for you at all or not, but like the first 3 seconds when you open up the
Mm,
game and you're in the dream as Alan
mm,
with the lighthouse, and there's this bridge to your left and a path down to the
yeah,
lighthouse on the right, and the bridge has like a few cones and that's it in front of it, and
yeah.
you can literally walk past the cones and you just straight up hit an invisible wall.
Yeah, I mean, that's 2010's game design.
Yeah, and
Um,
again, that's a lot of the things with this game. I don't think are its fault that it kind of sucks
yeah,
now, but for the time are really good. Uh,
mm,
it now that's also kind of a not a point that I would stand by at the same time because playing Metal Gear Solid, I think Metal Gear Solid has some things that don't work anymore, but still they're still effective. Like I
yeah,
no new
they make
game would try
sense.
it, but it still kind of is designed in a way that like a modern game feels intuitive, whereas
Mm,
Alan Wake and a lot, especially Yakuza One, that I just
mm,
played, feel like kind of fake in like
mm,
the what's it called, the funeral that you're attending for the
yeah,
third chairman in Yakuza One. There's stairs that look like you can go up them, but there's like two boxes in front of them, and so
yeah,
you cannot interact with it at all. You cannot do anything. It's the
mm,
fakest. It pulls you out so quickly,
yeah,
and again, it's not their fault. This what else are they going to do? Just I guess not have a
mm,
staircase. But
yeah,
the Alan Wake One does kind of push in the right direction where you don't need yellow paint to know where to go. It's
yeah,
just there's some like paths that I feel like could be,
more explored.
yeah. It almost needs like red paint. It doesn't need
Yeah,
yellow. You don't need to know where to go. You need where know where
yeah,
to not go. Also, on the yellow paint thing, I saw a screenshot of the original Final Fantasy VII. I've not played it,
yeah,
just for the record, but I saw a screenshot of the original Final Fantasy VII, and how do you it looked so how do you know how do you know where to go? It was like this it's this thing
uh,
that Resident Evil does really well where it's the pre-rendered background that is
mm,
placed on a 3D plane where the character's moving that feels like the character is actually in the room. Final Fantasy VII
mm.
is the exact opposite of that from what I have seen. It looks like this is an image they put here and then we just put a little guy on top of it and you kind of walk around the image is what it
Yeah,
really looked like. And
and you'd be surprised there are people out there who know that map, like, the
oh,
entire game, one to
yeah.
one.
I'm
Like,
sure. I'm sure.
wouldn't remember what they had for breakfast, but they could tell you every like, if you go through this door, it leads to this item shop with these characters. I was like, man,
Yeah.
I wish I had that kind of memory.
Yeah, no, it's I don't doubt that there are people. There's probably some Final Fantasy VII defenders out there too. They're like, oh, this kid, he doesn't know what he's talking about. But man, that is another one of those examples where it's well, I was gonna say it's one of those examples where like I don't think they could have done any better, but Resident Evil did it better, albeit on a
Yeah,
smaller scale. So I don't know.
I mean,
There are these
I
examples of them doing it better that I just think most games couldn't
yeah,
achieve.
I mean, just to rep
Yeah.
Final Fantasy VIII, the better Final Fantasy,
Wow.
not really. Eight's my favorite. I know it's worse, but eight does a much better job with the way that
Hmm.
they handled
Yeah.
that because they learnt from seven. But just one thing I want to touch on that you said, how you mentioned how it's like how Alan Wake almost feels like an open world. For those who don't know, during the development, it was meant to be an open world game.
Yeah.
Like, and they had to scrap it and rebuild it from the ground up. But the problem is, they still had a lot of that philosophy in the game design, and it sort of led to them having to do the two cones invisible wall thing.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned, the red paint, as to like, oh, you can explore here. They do technically have some off the beaten path, but this is one of my major complaint things about the game is they have what they call hidden chests that are about as obvious as I am fat. Like you can see it. It's not a secret. Like
Yeah.
it's clearly right there. I know it's there. Why are we pretending this is a hidden
Well,
chest? Why am I getting an achievement for a
does
hidden object?
oh, okay, I guess there's achievements that refer to it as that,
Yeah.
but I that didn't hit me because they explain it in the dam sequence near the end where Cynthia
Yeah.
Weaver's like, "I left those for you to find them, and only
Yeah.
someone who can." I forget how they explain it. Some stupid like only
Yeah.
someone who was
Some
looking for them
exposition.
could find them or whatever, and you have the
Yeah,
power, whatever.
it wasn't if it
But
wasn't for the achievement, it wouldn't have pissed me off so much, but
yeah,
because there was an achievement saying found X amount of hidden items, I'm like, "No, I'm out."
yeah,
This
that's
annoys me.
that's another one of those things, which is hidden as well, or the thermoses that
Mm,
those seem so out of place in this game. They make
yeah, it's
no sense, and I think I forget what video or who said it. I think it was Sam Lake, but like I think it was whoever they were partnering with to kind of publish it or platform or whatever that I think was Xbox maybe this was something Quantum Break and I'm just making it up, but I think someone
mm,
somewhere was like, we need to put something collectible in here for the achievements or
yeah,
whatever. And that's what it
it's
feels like.
just
It feels like they
it's
put it in a
2010's
week
game
before the
design.
game released, and it's just like, well, they need something else to do than walk around, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like it was there solely to give an attempt at replay value,
Yeah.
given the fact, this is sort of a game. Not that you can't play it multiple times, but you're not going to really play it back to back to back to back to back.
No.
You'll play it. It's one of those games. Just like, yeah, I might play this once a year, once every couple of years.
Yeah.
It's not,
Thankfully it's
it's not
short
like,
enough to do that at least.
yeah, it's a pretty quick game. I think it only took about 9 hours for me to beat, and apparently I played on hard. I don't. I,
Wow.
I selected normal, but
Okay.
it gave me the achievement for beating it on hard.
Okay.
So I'll take it. With the only problem I ran into in the game is just being how much the enemies throw shit at you because
Oh
they
yeah.
just never stop. Like you can't catch a break; they're just always throwing things at you. But it's a game that won't really leave you frustrated. You won't get confused, other than trying to understand some of the story points.
Yeah.
And you can just sort of go, okay, let me go from A to B and go on my merry way. Um, but like it's one of those things that it does with going from A to B, which is where I do have one other problem, but it's not really a problem. It's more just like I'm not sure how I feel. And that's where I feel like the game has a bit of an identity crisis because a lot of people call it a horror game. Or,
Oh yeah.
you'll get the occasional person who's like, it's survival horror. I'm like, no, I'm going to be like Jared and be really picky on the definition of
Yeah.
survival horror at that point. But I look at it and I go, it's more of a thriller. Like the horror aspects, yes, I get that they're there, but the game isn't really scary. It doesn't try to be scary. It tries to be tense. It tries to be, action packed. I'm like, it's more of a thriller to me. And it's one of the very few games that I think has been like a thriller game. I don't
No,
think
we
many games have done that.
we talked about that with Alan Wake 2 as well, where it's like it's like a kind of a, I don't know any other way to say it but survival horror, where like you're
Mm,
collecting things and you're shooting enemies with the things you collect kind of thing. But
mm,
it's like that kind of gameplay with a horror like aesthetic, but it's not
yeah,
actually scary. And I
yeah,
think Alan Wake 2 does a much better job of like, this seems like a very, very scary game when really there's like there's the jump scares they have, and
mm,
there's very scary music, but it's
yeah,
not a horror game at any sense. And I think this game also tries that, where it's like at its core, if you just kind of looked at the gameplay and really what you're
mm,
doing in the game, this is like this is an action game. This is
yeah,
not this is an action adventure with like
horror
a
elements.
horror elements that kind of appear to be scary until you actually kind of dive in and get to playing it.
Mm,
And that kind of feeds into some of the Stephen King novel
mm,
inspiration that Sam Lake, big Stephen King guy. A lot of this game takes inspiration from Stephen King.
mm,
That's a similar thing with the amount of his writing that I have read, which isn't much, but it's like yeah, this is horror aesthetic, but it's not. I'm not scared really. I'm
yeah.
just I'm
It's not something that's going to keep you up at night.
exactly, yeah. Now
You know,
I think the story will keep you up at night, at least to a little bit, just
yeah.
because of it is actually, to speak on some of the good things that the game does, it is actually compelling, even if it's not as
Mm,
deep as Silent Hill 2 or Alan Wake 2 or anything like that. It has the facade of deepness almost,
yeah,
where Alan Wake 2, you're definitely, you can tell, and this is just part in part the fact that we know that Remedy can make a deep game now. We know that they're
mm,
masters of the craft. With Alan Wake 1, you're like, oh, it's the funny Max Payne guys. They're making a
yeah,
horror game. A lot of the things don't feel intentional. They kind of feel like mistakes almost, where there's a
mm,
lot of misinformation and guesswork that leads to a conclusion that isn't even very much a conclusion at all. It's almost
yeah,
like it's not a lake, it's an ocean. It's something that you thought you knew that is now actually this huge thing that you really, really don't understand. But
yeah,
there's a lot in this game where it's like, yeah, they tried to make this seem deep. But it's not actually deep in many
yeah.
ways.
Like there's things like the whole Thomas Zane synthetic. Can't say her name. English is
Symphony.
hard. We CW. I'm just going by the initials. My brain has stopped working. Barbara, like that whole subplot about like, you know, basically the story essentially repeating itself with a third party observer and things going on and all that, and like one's darkness, one's light. It is like it's one of those things that tries to be deep. It's like mid 2000s metal, you
Yeah.
know, just to go to something I'm a
That's a
big
good
fan
analogy,
of.
yeah.
You know, it's like, oh yeah, you know, call your boyfriend a vegan because I've got beef or whatever the hell
Yeah.
that line is. It's like it's funny when you think about it. You're like, okay, that's kind of dumb. Like it's not bad, but it's not, you know, as what we've been saying, it's just not as in depth as it could be.
Yeah.
And I think like obviously they've had a lot more years of practice and things like that. They've got a lot more mature. The writing is, you know, tenfold better in Alan Wake 2 compared to 1. But you can see the skeleton of what Alan Wake 2 is
Yeah.
in Alan Wake 1. Like it's not like it's so far gone that it's a completely different game. It's like I can see what you're building here, but you know, again, right game, wrong time. You know, bring it out 5, 10 years later, and I think you would have, you know, arguably the best opening game to a franchise, or you know, their version, I guess, of an MCU.
Yeah.
You know, the Remedy universe. I think you'd have something truly special. But in saying that, one other really good thing that I do want to touch on, just real quick before I forget about it,
Of
as you
course.
mentioned, the game is a lot more actiony. It has the single greatest gameplay mechanic of any game I've ever played in my life, and that is the fact you can reload faster by hitting the reload button multiple
Oh,
times.
yeah, no. I okay, I'm a big, actually not a big I'm not a big fan of the combat in this game, but that is one thing that I
Oh yeah,
adored. Like, it's so gamey that if Remedy did that in like Alan Wake 2, I would be like, this is
Nah.
stupid. But this game is what's the term they always used? Campy,
Yeah.
like old horror movies. That like this game is campy enough where you can put some like, this is gameplay right here. This has nothing to do with
Yeah.
what's actually going on. We're putting this
It
in
it, it
because we
doesn't
want you to,
affect the narrative
yeah.
at all.
And so it kind of fits in that regard. Where like this makes sense just because that's how the game feels overall. But man, I loved that portion of it. What I didn't like though, everything else in the combat, I did not like. Jared was a big defender of it on the last episode, but
Mm.
I'm just not a huge fan of the. And part of this, you could again go back to the argument that this is on purpose, but I don't think Remedy at this point was thinking that deeply about these things, where you kind of just look in a direction and shoot in that direction, and Alan Wake sometimes hits things, maybe he doesn't. And you can't really aim for headshots. You can aim high and have a higher chance of hitting headshots, but you're not like actually aiming your gun really. You're kind of just pointing, right?
Yeah, and I think I'm going to be somewhere in the middle.
Yeah,
between you and Jared, if he's like defending that, I can
and
see.
You could make the argument that like that's because Alan Wake is he's a writer. He's not a Navy SEAL. You know, that's if he picked up a gun, he would kind of just instinctively point and shoot at the enemy. And so you can make that argument, sure. And then I would make the argument that okay, but then he kills like 500 people like in the runtime of the game. So he obviously knows how to.
I think there's too many enemies to make it make sense.
If that was your goal, which sure that would make sense, that'd be cool, but Remedy was not trying to do that, or else this game would be a lot different. This game wouldn't be an action game. It's like it's like Uncharted in a sense, where like this is
how is this archaeologist killing like 10,000 people? What the hell?
Like obviously they're not trying to make it seem like Nathan Drake is a trained killer, but because the gameplay is good, and because he can shoot with accuracy, and because he kills thousands of people through the Uncharted series, he is a trained killer, whether that was the goal in the story or not. And Alan Wake 1 is kind of the same thing, where like even if Remedy was trying to make it seem like, oh well, he would be scared and he doesn't really know what to do in this combat situation.
Yeah.
Okay, don't make him kill 300 people.
Yeah, I feel like the game starts really strong with the hitchhiker chasing him.
Yeah.
Like I think what they should have done is more of the stalker style horror game.
Yeah.
Because I think one, it's a very strong form. Like it's a little easy to kind of get away with doing because you're not having to add in gameplay that's necessarily as compelling as a good combat system.
Yeah.
But I think the shining the light mechanic, I love. I actually really like that, like stripping bandaging the battery. I think they made it a little too easy for me, with like just how many batteries you get.
Yeah.
And obviously, again, I played normal. That was just default what I played. So maybe on hard, it's a little more of a problem. But the fact that the battery recharges over time, it's like, it makes it a little too arcadey for its own good. And then two, there are fights you get into that you can't leave without killing everybody.
Yeah.
So it makes it feel like, okay, instead of being I can run from some fights, to all of a sudden now it's like, well, there's no point trying to run from these fights. I might have to kill everyone, so I might as well. And then all horror's gone because it's like, well, now I'm just in a combat encounter.
As you shoot guys as they pop up. Yeah.
Yeah, like they're here, just take the shot.
I think that's another one of those things that would be fixed if Remedy was like, okay, we're gonna take Alan Wake 1 and we're gonna kind of Last of Us Part 1 it, where we're gonna put it in the Alan Wake 2 engine and we're gonna make it feel like Alan Wake 2 instead of what it felt like. It much similar to the RE remakes, where it's like this is completely different, but it's like this is the kind of game we do now, so this is what it's gonna be like.
Yeah.
I think Alan Wake would benefit a lot from that as a product. Like if you're looking at it, is this game good or not? I think I
Mm.
would still prefer the campiness of Alan Wake 1 than a serious Alan Wake 1, just because
Yeah.
I think it's funny and like weird little funny Alan game from 2010. But
Yeah.
if you had like kind of a nemesis system in this where you're being literally
Mm.
chased by the dark presence through this forest, and there was a lot less overall just like shoot 10-15 enemies in this arena, and
Yeah.
instead you're running from, and they try this because the dark presence shows up in multiple scripted events to kind of chase you overall,
Yeah.
but it's not at the point where like I feel like I'm actually being chased by the dark presence. It's kind of just there, kind of in the
Yeah.
background, where like, oh, now they want me to know that the dark presence is here, and now it appeared, and hey, look, it's
Mm.
off in the distance. It never feels like I'm being chased. But
Yeah.
I feel like if you did it today, you could do that, and that would be a much more compelling game, just on a is this
Yeah.
is this a good horror game kind of scale.
Yeah, like, if they went more down the kinda Evil Dead route where like, especially with, like, Evil Dead 1 and 2, where you never actually see what the evil presence is.
Yeah.
You know, you just know what it's doing to everything around you, and I think if they were more ambiguous with it rather than kinda smacking you in the face with it,
Yeah.
like they do in Alan Wake 1, because like, I think in 2, they do kinda take a bit of a step back, and they let it be a little more up to interpretation with, like, the shadows walking around, like, "Ooh, is this gonna attack me? Is it, like, a non-issue?" Like, it creates so much more tension, and, like, you get more encapsulated in what you're doing, whereas with 1, it's like, "Oh, well, here's bad guys. They're here." "Oh, now you gotta run from this bloody wagon wheel that's now
Yeah.
evil. Ooh, spooky." It's like, this is just eh. Like, I like the scenes where it's like, "Oh, I see the dark presence in the woods. It's knocking down trees, like,
Hmm.
causing mass destruction, and I can't see it. I can
Yeah.
only kinda
Yeah.
hear it and feel it, like, from camera angles and things like that."
I think that's fixed in large part due to just the design of the dark presence itself. In Alan Wake 1,
Mm,
it's like this ball, like this like black hole that kind of follows you around essentially,
yeah,
where it just kind of swallows things up and throws it. Whereas in Alan Wake 2, you don't really see it, maybe two, three times throughout the whole runtime of the game. Like actually see
yeah,
the dark presence when it's not taking over Scratcher, or uh,
Barbara
in the
and
or in the form of a shadow or something. Like you only
yeah,
actually see the black mass that is uh the dark presence like very very few times, but when you do see it, it's like literally swallowing the subway tunnel
mm,
whole, and it's like kind of encroaching on you, like the
mm,
entire world is falling apart. In Alan Wake 1, it's like this just orb, basically, that's
yeah,
not very scary past, "Oh, I don't wanna die to this because this thing's stupid." Whereas in
yeah, and the
Alan Wake 2,
checkpoint
it's like,
system is a bit shit, so now I have to
yeah, yeah.
replay 20 minutes of this game.
In 2, it's like, "Oh, shit, this area is actually getting, like, swallowed whole by the dark presence. I
Mm,
have to get to a safe room," which, does kinda segue me into what I wanna talk about with the light system.
mm,
I think this might be controversial, but I think the light system in Alan Wake 1 is better than 2. I
I agree.
love I love the, like, Alan Wake 2 tries to do save rooms, I think, too much,
Mm,
where, like, every time you see the little light that's suspended above you, it's in a room.
mm,
It's not like a street lamp somewhere. But
yeah,
the parts of gameplay in part 1, in Alan Wake 1, that I really liked were the ones where you were at a light and you're like, okay, I got to get to this house, or this objective that's further down the street. So I'm gonna sprint as fast as possible out of this light,
yeah.
fight my way, and get to the next light, and then take a breather and
Yeah, and you might
kind of
have that light
leapfrog.
turn off on you while
Yeah,
you're on the way there, and you're
yeah,
like, "Oh, shit."
and they'll do things like that keep it tense, and it's never
Mm,
like 100% assured that you'll get there, and that your plan will work. But it's like you kind of know what to do in a combat situation,
mm,
which some of the situations are just kill all the enemies. Those ones I didn't like, but the ones where they were
yeah,
like open and you have options where you could either stick out in the open and just fight them all at once, or hop from light to light, or fight, take a break in a light, fight, go to the next light kind of thing.
mm,
That is much more interesting to me than any of the combat in Alan Wake 2. and definitely more
Yeah.
interesting than the parts of Alan Wake 1 where you're just like in an arena shooting enemies.
Yeah. And like one thing I like and dislike at the same time, because I can never make up my mind. Because there are times where I loved it and times where I'm like, that kind of ruined the flow. Um, is when you would walk, and this might not be the case in the remake. So this is just from my experience playing the original. When you walk into a street lamp, if you're being chased by say 4 or 5 enemies, once you're in that lamp, they're gone.
Yeah.
So they're just deleted. They don't exist anymore.
Hmm.
And what I would have liked to have happened is when I come out of that light, they're still there.
Mm.
Like they respawn in. And the reason why I'd like that is because that light is like, okay, I can take a breather, but that's it. Like the darkness is still out there. But when you get into that light and they're all gone, it's like, okay, well now I can just do whatever I want.
See, I think that would be tough because then right the way it's designed right now, lights are like they're kind of like your goal, right? You like
Mm,
you see a light and like I need to get there so that this encounter can be over and I'm safe. I'd be
mm,
worried that if they're if they stay like existing outside of the light and they respawn, or if they're like they're doing their little taunts outside the light
yeah.
when you're inside the light or something like that. I feel like that would take away a lot of the like power that light has in this game, and
Mm,
I feel like it would almost cheapen it. Where like especially when Thomas Zane comes up and he's like the little light in the sky,
yeah.
it feels like this is like an all powerful kind of being at points. Like the darkness is the dark god, and anytime you get to a light source, that is like
Mm,
the good light god, right? And I'd be worried that it would start to feel less like that and more like just, oh, here are little safe zones, instead of this is the good presence versus the bad. It would just feel like spots of good in the dark presence,
mm.
if that makes any sense
Yeah,
to what I'm
I
saying.
get what you're saying, but the only reason why I say that is just to go to another series that uses a lot of the same kind of thematic idea, is obviously called The Darkness, except it's the other way around,
Yeah.
where you play the darkness.
Yeah.
But and I'm on record as saying they are among my absolute favorite games. Like 1 and 2, along with Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2, are my all-time favorite games by far, and nothing's gonna change that ever.
Mhm.
But the reason why I like the idea of the light being kind of just a safe zone is solely because the idea is where the light isn't is where the darkness is. So if I'm in the light, I'm safe, like as I
Mhm.
should be. And I think what you could do is have more kind of designed areas in a sense. So like there's a lot of, especially in Alan Wake 1, there's a lot of areas where it's like, oh, broken down farmhouse, things like that, or barns that are falling apart, or broken cabins. And some of the cabins, and I'm pretty sure it's like in the first half of the game, I forget exactly where it was, but you can turn the light switch on and it
Oh
lights
yeah.
the whole cabin up and you feel
Yeah.
safe. And I'm
Mhm.
like, I like that. To me, that makes more
But
sense if I had more control over where light could be.
I agree with that part of your point, but I don't think that the enemies coming back after you leave the light helps to achieve that at all. Like I think everything that you're saying makes sense, that like these are parts in the darkness that are kind of these like bastions of safety, and everything that you've just argued there, I think stays the same whether the enemies disappear, because whenever you whenever you're playing this game, it's kind of designed to do that, I think, in ways where like you get to a light source. That light source is usually I think it saves all the time whenever you go into light sources.
Yeah, it's
It's
automatic checkpoint.
Yeah, it saves, and then you walk like six more steps and you're now in the new area and there are new enemies. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I mean, that's to me, like the reason why I prefer it that way is not just because, again, like the idea of darkness outside, it's especially in certain spots where it's like, okay, I'm just going to run to the light because I
Mm.
remember doing this, like run to the light, enemies are gone, go back, explore, get all the bloody coffee mugs and all
Mm.
that crap. It to me, it's not that the enemies aren't intimidating in a way, because they definitely have their moments where they're well done, but I do think they lack a lot to impact the game. Like they
Yeah.
just don't have a lot of depth. There's basically, realistically, there's like three enemy types. There's the birds that are the most annoying
Oh
bloody
yeah, I
thing in the
forgot the
world.
birds. Yeah.
Yeah, that can fly through the ground, which is bullshit. I
Now,
have
okay,
died to them coming up
this
underneath me and killing me.
I didn't. I never had that happen to me. I actually liked the birds. I thought they
No,
were.
I
I thought they
like
were a little
them beyond
glitchy,
that.
but I,
Yeah,
I did like them as a just like as a as an idea, sort of.
yeah,
I think it
it's a
was
good
better than
nod
the
to Hitchcock.
execution.
To
Yeah,
Hitchcock. Then you got like just, sorry, you got four enemies. You got two like normal sized dudes, one that's
yeah,
really fast, one just regular. Both of them function essentially the same. They'll just throw shit at you if they're not
yeah.
close to you. And then you got the big heavy guy that's like, whether he's got a chainsaw or a sledgehammer, doesn't matter. It's 6 shots, he dies. You know, middle
And
guys,
you
three
have the
shots, they're dead.
and you have the possessed objects as well.
Oh
That
yeah.
those are annoying. I hate those. Can we?
They have what, the fact that you have to use like an entire battery to
Yeah,
kill them is
I
bullshit.
I think I did play on hard originally, and
Mm,
the game itself was not very hard. It wasn't.
mm.
It wasn't uh, difficult to get through. I don't think for me at least.
No,
But
it's not a hard game at all.
anytime I would never have enough light for
Yeah,
the objects to destroy them. And as far as I know, there wasn't anything I could do except just reload the save. And so I had to
yeah,
do that multiple times where I was stuck because I didn't have enough light to get rid of the objects. So
yeah,
I was progress blocked. I had to restart, which was not my fault. I didn't know there were going to be objects after this combat
yeah.
encounters. So like,
It's one of those, you have to know what's coming to be able
yeah,
to deal with it. And because I haven't played the game in like the better part of 10 years, playing it again, like I don't think I've ever been more frustrated in terms of games I've played recently than having to deal with the objects, especially because in certain camera angles, and again, this is 2010 game, I give it a pass, you know, like it annoys me at the time, but I'm not going to hold it against it,
mhm,
where a gate will be possessed and you have to shine the light on it to
yeah,
get through that gate, but you're getting attacked from behind. So you turn around to like deal with them. But Alan is just touching the gate with like the very back end of his booty cheeks, and you're just dead.
yeah.
And you're like, great, now I got to do this all again.
That
And
happened
I
to me a
had,
lot in the DLC too, where there'd be like I'd be
yeah,
fighting an enemy and then an object that I didn't even know existed would just come flying at me, hit me, and then it would knock me into an enemy. The enemy would hit me, and I would just be instantly dead without
yeah,
like a chance to actually defend myself.
you get wombo comboed to hell in Alan Wake 1.
Yeah.
Like the amount, especially with the throwing things. I know I complain about it, but it drove me nuts just constantly. You feel like you, and like I get they want the action to feel intense, but why it works in Max Payne versus Alan Wake is because in Max Payne you are in complete control of what you are doing.
Yeah.
Whereas in Alan Wake, the way the movement isn't super fluid. I think it's perfect for what it is, actually.
Mhm.
But you know, you've mentioned it's kind of like tank controls, but
Yeah.
not quite. And I completely agree. It's like a little bit more fluid than tank controls. It's how I think the the Resi 2 remake and Resi 3 remake should have played. You know, I don't think
Really?
full 360 movement. I think being a little more stiff
Uh-huh.
would have felt more realistic to what Resi is.
Mm.
But because of how easy it is to move in those games, like there's a reason why I speedrun them, because you know, you can just dodge everything like
Yeah.
it's nothing. Whereas in Alan Wake, he shouldn't be able to dodge everything. You have a dodge button. It works better than RE3's original dodge, but it's trash. Like the timing
Yeah.
isn't great. It feels like you have to know instinctively when they're going to start a swing in order to dodge. More
It
so
actually
than,
gets worse in Alan Wake 2.
yeah.
It the
Yeah, I heard
dodge
Jared
gets
complain about that.
worse. I don't know how, but oh, the dodge in Alan Wake 2 is actually maybe useless. And
Yeah,
like I don't if they could have removed it and it would have probably been a better game for it.
yeah. But it's one of those things where I go, okay, well, the movement's a little bit stiff, but the one problem they had is, as I said, the enemies throw so much shit constantly because they're not necessarily aggressive. Because I don't think they wanted you to die too much.
Yeah.
Like the game sort of feels like you ever watch like any action movie. Whenever the hero gets surrounded, it's one enemy at a time will come at them. It's
Yeah.
never, hey, there's 40 of us. Let's just pile on and we would
Yeah.
win. You know, like the common sense thing to do. It's, oh, well, I'll wait till John's had his turn, then Sam can have his go, and then I'll have a go. I'll get my ass kicked, and then, you know, Bob can come in. And,
Yeah.
you know, like it's freaking stupid. And like, I think they've designed the game to sort of be like that. Like, you will get multiple dudes sort of coming at you, but it always feels like you've got time to deal with one before you have to deal with another.
Yeah.
And that's where to go back a little bit to like the guys that are really fast, that are normal sized, they do make that change. But they don't come in really until the second half of the game. And I think
Yeah.
they would have been better off being in there from the start.
No, I actually
Just
think I like the combat encounters with the fast guys better
Oh, yeah.
for a lot, mainly because you have the guys throwing stuff are just annoying. They're not actually, they don't really ever kill you. It's
Yeah.
just if you have a very similar to like the original RE4 with the hatchets that the villagers would throw. If you were just very unlucky, you could just get into a combo where hatchet, 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 hatchet.
Yeah, big guy with a hammer and then dead.
Yeah, and that's not fun. That's not. There was literally nothing you could do to have not died there. It's just that's how something lined up. So you're dead now. So I think if you maybe remove the guys with the hatchets, maybe kind of ticked the aggressiveness up, not the actual damage or like really even how often they hit you, because I think the fast guys are very well balanced in that regard. But if you just made them feel more aggressive and
make
scarier,
them come at you more instead of being like, we're just going to walk at you incredibly slowly like RE4.
Yeah, this fast guys especially, they'll do the thing where they like teleport left and right, like 30 meters away. I'm like, I'm never going to be shooting at them at that point. And when they do that, I'm trying to get my light onto them. So it's just kind of annoying. It doesn't feel good, really. Like, I guess they're trying to avoid the light, the flashlight.
Yeah, but at the same time, like they're avoiding the flashlight when you're not even concentrating on it because they're too far away to be an effective shot.
So
it's I don't know if you've ever seen the Blade movies, but in Blade 1,
no, I haven't. They're on my list of things to watch this year, actually. Though.
Okay, I will gladly watch them with you. They are some of my all-time favorites. You will have to mute me though, because I will quote the entire movie as I watch it through. But at it's the final fight. There's a scene where the bad guy. I'm not going to spoil it by naming names of characters and shit, because I am a good boy. But
you're not
you'll
like Jared.
See him.
Wow.
Yeah,
ruin media for me by talking with your big mouth.
I'll just ruin your life. I'll ruin your YouTube channel.
That's okay. That's okay. I'd rather I'd rather that than a movie being spoiled.
But there's the scene where the character, he like in the final fight, he dashes left, right, and then really fast forward. And I'm like, if they did that, it would have been really cool.
Yeah.
And just to go to a game that, although it sucks, Redfall, the vampires actually will do that. They'll dash at you really quick. And it's like, when you have 6 of them, that shit's terrifying.
Yeah.
But given the fact that game sort of sucks and how easy it is to cheese it, it's like, yeah, whatever.
You know, Redfall actually, I think, had good combat whenever you're like in an empty field. It actually, not good combat, actually. Let me rephrase that. Good enemy AI when there are 0 objects anyway. When there's nothing for them to run into.
To get stuck on.
Yeah. That game, I played maybe 2, 3, 4 hours, I guess. That was like my biggest takeaway. It was like this. These devs know how to make like you could see they knew how to do it. They just didn't have time or money or whatever.
I think it was time
to like actually make it work in all these situations. But like by itself, it's effective. You just have to. It has to be the best scenario for it to actually work.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot better now because I am doing my going back series and looking at it. I've got like 35 gig of footage or something crazy just there.
So how many hours of Redfall have you played in your life?
I think I'm at like 15 or something like that.
Wow.
So
what a brave soldier.
Well, as I said, it's got a lot better. And like, if I'm willing to replay the entirety of Alien Colonial Marines, I am willing to give Redfall a go.
Yeah.
And again, Alien Colonial Marines, it got better. And the Alien AI, once they found out that one little mistake where they used a semicolon instead of a colon in the code that broke the entire AI, yeah, it got a lot better. Is it great? No, it's okay for what it is. And the same thing with Redfall. It's a game I'd sort of boot up and just zone out playing. I wouldn't actively
Redfall
play it.
Redfall is a good podcast game.
It
Mainly
is.
mainly also because the cutscenes are literally non-existent,
Oh
but
yeah.
it's a good I'm going to sit here zone out. It doesn't have good enough combat for me to want to like be focused in on the combat. It's not like a
Yeah.
Devil May Cry, and I do not care about what's happening in the story. So I just hop
Yeah.
in and
It
play a
is
little.
the best cheap feeling expensive game on the market. Because like at least here in Australia, because as gaming prices, cost of living, and all that goes up, they want $120 for that game. Just the base game. The deluxe edition that comes with barely anything is 165. I used to buy a collector's edition. I had the collector's edition for Witcher 3. That cost me $165. That came with a statue that my ex-fiance's cats broke, but I
Oh,
still have everything else. you know, like I have collector's editions for like Grand Theft Auto 5, Dark Souls 2, like statues, everything, all this really cool stuff. Paid like $120. And now they're asking that for a game. And it's like, going back and playing something like Alan Wake, I'm like, man, why would I? This is why I started. Like, I pitched the idea of doing the budget series to you in the first place because I'm like,
yeah,
going back and playing these games, I'm like, this is just so much better value for money for what it is. Even if I'd say, narratively, games these days are in a league of their own compared to what we used to have because, you're getting more diversity coming through, more, ideas, more stories, better writing, better technology. And even though games are launching, let's be real, in worse states as time is going on, that's more greed from
yeah,
publishers,
yeah.
so more so than devs. I don't blame the devs
No,
9 times out of 10. But Alan Wake 1, like, it's going back and playing it. I'm like, man, for what it is, for a game you can pick up for like $20, it is 100% worth playing.
I bought Alan Wake 1 on Steam. I don't remember if it was like a humble bundle thing or a code or if it was actually on Steam. I picked it up for $5. That
100% worth it.
that is worth it. Alan Wake is in maybe like my top 30 favorite games of all time, but it's not in my top 30 best games of all time. uh, it was absolutely worth it for that. Where I'm not expecting it to be game changing. Like walking into Alan Wake 2, it was like, okay, this has to be like, I have to feel like a different person after this.
Yeah.
Alan Wake 1, I was like, okay, funny little game. But it like, it's just on that verge of being smart enough and good enough that it's like, it's worth, you don't have to put much mind power into this game, right?
Yeah.
But yet it's also confusing and seems deep. So therefore, I feel like intellectually challenged with 10% of my brain that I have on. So it's like a
Yeah.
perfect it's a perfect mix of that as a whole. Okay, where we are for a mini podcast. This is getting very long already, but
Yeah.
so I don't want to really. I've thought about it a lot. I don't want to go through the whole plot summary with this game or anything. I think we've kind of gone through mainly all of
Yeah.
our thoughts on this. So I do want to ask you first before we leave, because this is an older game. I'm not going to ask you to give it a game score, like how good is this game. Instead, I want to know your completely subjective score. If you're not looking at it from, well, for the time it was good, or
Yeah.
this, it doesn't look as pretty as a game now. If you're just looking at your experience and the time you had with it, and this could be your replay, this could be original time with it, both together, however you want to take this, I just want your completely subjective scoring of this game.
It's tough because there are certain things that elevate it to, like, compared to other games of that era, especially considering I've been playing a lot of games from that era. I love Barry, even though he's a little
I
shit.
love Barry. We never talked about Barry.
Barry's
Barry
Barry's
is Such a good character. I love
He
him.
is the goat. He's the Usopp of this world, and I'll fight anyone who's got a problem with Usopp in the comments because I'm a One Piece nerd. Nightingale does lower it a bit for me because
Yeah.
it felt like a character that's like, hey, we're trying to be a little meta, but we're just gonna have this unhinged guy just shooting at innocent people
Yeah.
constantly. I'm like, that was like one of the things that I'm like, I get what they're doing, but this was like the first big misstep they took narratively to me is like his introduction.
Yeah.
It's like it didn't feel right. So with that said, Barry outweighs Nightingale. So
Okay.
I've got
Yeah.
to give it
Definitely.
like an I got to give it like an 8.5 out of 10.
Yeah. No, I think this, I think I'm in the same spot with this where I think the game by itself, if I were like reviewing this for Game Informer or something, and this is the product we got today, this would be like 7, maybe at most.
Yeah.
There's it gestures to something bigger and greater, and it started, which is now I think the best read, maybe the only good cinematic universe of games, essentially,
Mm,
where there was clearly people behind this series and Control and the entire Remedy pantheon as a whole that like they know what they're doing and they know what they wanted to achieve, and now they're working to get their vision. This being the thing that kind of started that, or at least started the marbles rolling down into that path
yeah.
eventually. I have to give it credit for that, but that says nothing to what this game actually is on its own by itself, which is a pretty mid kind of arcadey attempt at something better.
Yeah.
But my enjoyment of it outweighs all the issues that I've talked about it. I love weird Alan Wake that kind of
Mm,
has like 4 personalities at the same time. It isn't a real
yeah.
person at all. He is not believable. Alice, maybe definitely a top contender in Alan Wake 1. Alice is a top contender for worst woman in a game, I
Oh
think
yeah.
ever. Um,
So badly written.
she is so one note and she is so like, hey guys, we should put a woman in the game, but we're gonna make her an asshole. And like, and it's so bad. But Barry's great. I'm okay with Nightingale. I think he's dumb. Like this is stupid that they've put this in here, but like I admire the stupidity of it.
Yeah.
And of course, we've talked about how the story is like this deep on the surface. That sounds
Yeah.
like it can't be true at the same time, but like it is.
Yeah. The story wants to be an ocean, but it's a puddle.
Yeah,
Suck
exactly.
shit. I got you with your own
And it
bullshit.
looks when you're passing it, you're like, oh, that could be an ocean right there, and then you actually step in it, and you know your foot goes like 1 inch
Yeah.
deep. So I would say this hits like a 9.5 on my actual enjoyment because
Mm,
for all of its weird, funny little things, I love the weird, funny little things.
yeah.
But I also love Alan Wake 2, where all the weird, funny little things are gone, and it's actually a good project. So,
Yeah.
uh,
I think what it does is something that I think is honestly missing from a lot of games, and this is something I say all the time, is fun.
yeah,
Alan Wake 1 is fun to play. Like, yes, it's campy, it's silly, it's trying to be more than what it is. But when you are playing it, you will just notice you're halfway through the game, and you're like, I feel like it's only been 20 minutes.
yeah,
You know, like it's just a game you can get into and enjoy. Whereas where I've heard with Alan Wake 2 is although it's an incredible experience, it's one of those games where you play it and you're like, okay, I'm I'm good. You know, like
yeah.
I want to get it like I want to experience this, but that's it.
Yeah. No, I think it's on this scale. I think Remedy's really good at this. First of all, just like their games feel like they all want to make this game. Like everyone at the office
Mm,
shows up and they're like, "What are we gonna do today? We're gonna make this damn game," and they do it,
yeah.
and they all have fun and they like their jobs. Um, maybe Quantum Break doesn't. It's a little iffy on that,
Yeah.
but like Remedy's really good at making it feel like that. And Alan Wake 2 is sort of on one end of the spectrum where like one end of the spectrum is like these devs hate their jobs, like
Yeah.
Skull and Bones level, where like no
Yeah.
one, maybe they really wanted to make the game that they had like this vision for, but like the actual product is just corporate leadership being like, you got to put this in the
Yeah.
game, you got to put this in game, just make the damn game. And then on the other side, you have, we're the devs, we can do whatever we want. This is our game. It's the kind
Yeah.
of the Kojima feeling where like, I don't care if the player really gets it. I'm doing this for something bigger. Like
Yeah.
this isn't for fun. This is to make you feel a certain way so it can pay off in a certain way.
Mm.
Alan Wake 2 is like on that end of the scale. And then Alan Wake 1's like right in the middle. That is it's a good gateway drug too for something deeper where
Mm.
it's quote unquote art, but I wouldn't say it's actual art. I mean, all video games are art
Yeah.
in the video game art way, but like Alan Wake 2 is like a piece of art media that like
Yeah. It's an
stands on its own.
experience.
Yeah.
You know, like
And
it's like Spec Ops: The Line. That's a game
yeah.
you should play once. You
Yeah.
don't play twice.
Alan Wake 1 though is like right in that kind of perfect center where I think maybe if you're someone that doesn't think you're interested in games as art as a medium and you
Mm.
just, you play your Call of Duty and you like Battlefield, you like shooting things
Yeah.
or you like your little scary horror games, like you play Amnesia, that kind of thing, but you want to kind of see if it's your thing. Alan Wake
Yeah.
1's like right there. Like it's doesn't make you think too hard, but it still points towards something bigger, which
Yeah.
is a hard balance, I think, to make, to give it okay, I was gonna say to give it what it's worth, but I think maybe that was also not on purpose.
Yeah.
That mix of deep and not deep, I think that was just how it ended
Yeah.
up. But it is worth it in that regard.
Yeah. I'd
Any
say it's like it's the gateway drug to like
Yeah.
the horror genre of gaming.
Hmm.
Because there's like horror has some of the best storytelling games that exist, but a lot of people just never play it because they're like, shit's
Hey,
scary.
why? Okay, before we end the podcast and give our last thoughts, I do want to ask this. This is a
Mm.
theoretical question. I don't expect you to know the answer. This maybe isn't even an answerable question.
Mm.
Why are horror games, like, generally when you look at everything, every game released,
Mm.
it is much easier to give a horror game the tag or the not genre. It, it's easier to say like Silent Hill 2. Like that game is art, right?
Yeah.
And that is one of the best horror games. If you go to like best action game, take like
Doom.
Doom.
Greatest game ever
Is
made.
Doom again, I'm a big proponent of all games are art, but Doom doesn't
Yeah.
feel like a deep piece of media. Why are
I
horror games where all of those things kind of congregate? I don't really
like
understand why.
I'd put it down to a couple of very key points really quick. Is one, art direction. I
Mm.
think just to make action games interesting, you got to Michael Bay it. You got to go explosions everywhere.
Yeah.
It's usually like it's going to be pretty, but it's not going to be artistic in its design.
Yeah.
Whereas horror games, they don't necessarily want you to see everything, so they try to obscure things. So the art direction tends to be more of a focus. Second, although I would say the genre as a whole typically has, on average, the worst voice acting of any genre in existence, when you get a good voice acted horror scene, I think
Yeah.
it is so much more intense than just about anything else because it's usually got a lot more emotional weight to it.
Mhm.
And three, I think just story wise, you can make them a lot more impactful because it can be more than just spooky guy wants to kill me, as much as heartbreak, like I mean, covering every major story beat you could. You
That's
could
true.
sort of
You
get
can't have
everything.
like a psychological horror game without there
Yeah,
being story along with it. But you can
yeah.
have a
Action
beat
game.
'em up game or something with
Yeah.
no story at all, and it would be fine. So yeah, okay. That
Yeah. I mean, look at Doom. Like, I love Doom, but Doom 1 story is he didn't want to like hurt civilians, so he got sent to Mars, kills
Yeah.
hell. He kills all the demons. And then when he comes back to Earth, they killed his pet rabbit. So that's Doom 2. He just kills hell because they killed his pet rabbit. That's the fucking plot of the game. And
Yeah.
there is a reason why I love Doom because it is a game for a game's sake.
Mhm.
But it is not a game that I say you must play.
Mhm.
Like it is not a story worth experiencing. Like I mentioned before, Spec Ops: The Line. which unfortunately is a game I don't think by the time this releases will actually be playable, or it's like going offline.
It's completely delisted from all digital stores. So
Yeah,
if you own it already digitally, if you buy a key, I think you're okay. If you go on like G2A or a gray market site, I think you can
yeah,
get your hands on it, though I haven't looked. It might be really expensive now.
yeah,
Um,
probably.
and if you have physical, I think you're fine. So I think
Yeah.
there are still ways to get it, but it's much,
Mm.
much harder.
But that is a game where the narrative and the storytelling is next level.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of those games a lot of people, once you play it, you're like, holy shit, this is something. But like most action games just didn't have that. Like they'll
Yeah.
have intense moments, but yeah, I don't think it's like Alan Wake 2 does that. Like it is, whoa, there's a lot going on here. I need to digest this.
Yeah.
Whereas Alan Wake 1, it's yeah, it's a fun action romp with some story beats.
Yeah. I think to kind of tie this up all up in a nice little bow is that uh, Alan Wake 2 especially is a it's a work of art. Just
Mm,
it stands on its own as like this is when you play this, you're not thinking this gameplay is fun. Well, I mean, especially in Alan Wake 2, the gameplay is not fun.
yeah.
So but that's not what you're going to Alan Wake 2 for.
Yeah.
Alan Wake 1 though it is a game. It is shooting the enemies seems fun. I'm going to go shoot
Yeah.
enemies and watch this story play out at the same time. It's not like I wouldn't classify it as a work of art in of itself, you know?
Yeah. It's got old school design trying to evolve into new
Yeah.
school, like the more modern age of gaming. And as you said, like it's right in the middle. It's the whole friggin' end game thing, perfectly balanced as everything should be. And I think that's what makes it stand out, especially from a game of that era.
Yeah.
Because we had thousands of games come out in that time. But why is Alan Wake one of the most influential of that time? Why is it one like you look at a lot of YouTubers who are like, I waited 13 years for Alan Wake 2, 14 years for Alan Wake 2. Why were people waiting and clamoring for this game? Because, this game, when it came out, was better than everything else. Even if you look at it mechanically, it just really isn't.
Yeah,
Like,
that's kind of amazing to me as well that like the the game itself is nothing special, really. It's
mm,
more it's more like what it did that was special. The the effects of this game I think are better than the game itself, if that makes
yeah,
sense.
it's definitely it's one of those games, as you said, like, it doesn't stand on its own as art, but it is somehow the perfect balance of everything that it brought together to create an experience that is 100% worth having even today. As long as you go in understanding that the flying objects and enemies throwing shit will piss you off to no end.
Yeah. Okay. As of writing, as of podcasting right now, I'll
Yeah.
like $15 on the good old Steam. I definitely
21.50 if you're in Australia.
yeah, if you're one of those like one of the 6 people that live on that continent, there you go. Um, I
Yeah, we
think
all died.
yeah, I think Alan Wake 1 definitely, especially because it's short too. I think it's an
Mm,
experience worth to be had, even in a very very packed couple of years with games. I think it's
mm.
like RE4, one of those games that it's kind of in the pantheon of yeah, playing it today is not you can see the issues with it, but like it's not
Mm.
about what the game is, it's what the game did.
Yeah. And it's, there's a reason why RE4 goes down as one of the all-time classics, even though I'm kind of on board with Jared, where it's like it sort of ruined the series as a whole
Yeah.
because of how it shifted the tone.
Hmm.
But I think for the time it came out, it made sense to be what it was.
Yeah.
And the same thing with Alan Wake. It makes sense that it was the way it was. And I will always maintain that. Right game, wrong time. If the series as a whole started today, I think you probably would still have the same level of impact that Alan Wake 2 is having.
Yeah.
But just, obviously starting out the Remedy universe.
I think that's also partly due to the fact that if they made Alan Wake 1 today, in many facets, it would just be Alan Wake, what we have with Alan Wake 2.
Yeah, it really would.
All right,
Except
well,
without the bullshit collectibles.
oh yeah, no thermoses and although wait,
Yeah.
does Alan Wake 2
I
have
think
thermoses?
I
No, they
think
have
it
the
does. They have collectibles, don't
no, because
they?
the thermoses are the save, but they're like these little
No, that's the
like
words of power I'm thinking of.
no, yeah, well there's that, but I'm thinking of the briefcase charms that you can get. Those are
Oh
like the
yeah,
collectibles, I guess, but they're not like there's not like 50 to collect. You just like kind of naturally get them. I mean, you could probably
yeah,
there's probably like an achievement or something for that, but
yeah,
it doesn't feel as like nailed on.
yeah,
Okay, well, I think that was a pretty good discussion of everything Alan Wake 1. This was supposed to be like a mini podcast in between
yeah,
series, but it ran like an hour and 50 minutes. So
yeah.
let's get out of here. Anything else you want to say just overall about Alan Wake?
Great game. I love that the original cover is based off the thing, and yeah, something. Actually, there's one thing. This is the thing
Okay.
I mentioned at
All
the
right.
very start. I
Yeah.
forgot. This is something no one ever brings up, and it shits me. Okay, location that everything takes place, Bright Falls, right?
Mhm.
The TV show, Night Springs, the complete polar opposite. No one brought up that joke, and it shits me that no one has ever mentioned it. So I'm doing it here.
I actually did not. That never hit me. That is amazing.
No one has brought it up. I'm like, has no one noticed like the whole light dark dichotomy? And then you
Yeah.
go Bright Falls, Night Springs, the complete polar opposite of each other. Always shit me that no one brought that up. But
Yeah.
now that that's said, I'm good. I'm happy. I can die. So there'll be
Okay.
5 Australians left.
Yeah.
I did my part.
Good to know. We'll be decreasing the Australian population by at least like 30% with your death. So I'm very sad for that continent and what little is left. Thank you all for watching this accidentally very long episode of Review. Next week, I think, depending on Jared's schedule, because he's who I'm going to be hopefully having on for Silent Hill 1. Depending on the schedule, I think that will be next week. If not, figure out something to talk about. We'll talk about some stupid little game if not. But
Yeah.
keep a lookout for that. This will be releasing on Sunday, so tomorrow will be a touch bad episode if you're watching this on the day of release. But yeah, Alan Wake 1, funny little game. Alan Wake, funny little guy. Love him.
Yeah, he's a funny little guy.
And Barry too. We love Barry.
I
This is
fucking
a
love Barry.
supportive Barry household.
We stand Barry, as the kids would
Definitely.
say.
All right.
Can
Well,
say that right?
yeah, I
I'm
think
not too old. That's not out of fashion.
The K-pop Twitter did like 4 years ago, so probably that's gotten to like Instagram Reels kids now, I'd guess.
Yeah, probably. Got 'em.
Anyways, I am Benny Gerkman. This is Karlec, wonderful, wonderful YouTuber. Check him out below, or check out his Twitter below, because I'm not gonna remember to put his YouTube, so sucks for him.
Who gives a shit?
I'll see you tomorrow if you are a big Touchpad listener, or I'll see you for the next review if you're just a long podcast listener. But this has been Cross Circle Squared. I'm Benny Gerkman. I'll see you in the next one.